Of all the human species that have ever roamed the planet, none capture our imagination quite like the Neanderthals. They're so intriguingly close to us, some even call them our sister species, and guess what? Their DNA still lives on in most of us today. Now, pinning down exact timelines can be tricky, but what we do know is that Neanderthals inhabited parts of Eurasia roughly between 400,000 and 40,000 years ago. Most of that falls within the Chibanian stage of the Pleistocene, a time when Eurasia was older, harsher, and overflowing with massive, megafauna-sized challenges. Surviving there, no walk in the park. So they didn't just survive, they evolved into what some might call superhumans, at least biologically. From their anatomy to physiology, everything screams badass adaptation. Let's start with their build. At first glance, Neanderthals might not look that different from us. Sure, they were generally shorter. Skeletal data suggests about 14 centimeters, around 5.5 inches shorter than modern post-WWI populations, with the tallest specimen, a mud one, clocking in at roughly 1.78 meters 5'10". Not towering, but not stubby either. But here's the twist: despite being shorter, they were so much heavier. Average males tipped the scale at around 83 kilograms 183 pounds, and females at 66 kilograms 146 pounds, about 20% heavier than the average Homo sapiens. That extra heft came from skeletons that were dense, compact, thick bones that were often twice the density of ours. Their shoulders, chest, femurs, arms, triceps, knees all super beefed up. In short, they were muscular and powerful. Why the bulk? Think close quarters hunting. These guys took on medium and large prey rhinos, horses, even woolly mammoths using massive spears. And packing that kind of firepower demanded serious upper body strength. Their physiques weren't just built, they were weapons. Their rugged builds weren't just for offense, durability was built in. A whopping 79% to 94% of recovered Neanderthal skeletons show evidence of major, fully healed trauma, fractures, blunt force injuries, even amputations. One elderly Neanderthal had only one arm, a smashed clavicle, blindness in one eye, and ear damage so severe it blocked his hearing, yet he lived on. Talk about grit. What caused all that damage? Likely a cocktail mix: high-risk hunting, clashes with other Neanderthals, and even animal attacks. One study found that about 74% of them had scars from encounters with big cats, wolves, or bears, but these seemed to be animals defending themselves, not trying to eat them. Brutal stuff. Even their skin, hair, and nails weren't for show, they were battle gear. Genetic studies link Neanderthal DNA to thicker skin, hair, and nails, adaptations perfect for rough terrain and cold climates. Those big, muscular arms, researchers suggest they were drenched in hormones that help pump up their muscle mass, simulating modern bodybuilders using gear. We're talking about raw, natural biological juice that let them lug 27 kilograms 50 pounds of meat for up to 48 kilometers, the equivalent of 138 soccer field laps. No training, just natural-born strength. If they were around today, Neanderthal males might bench around 200 kilograms 500 pounds, females, maybe 160 kilograms 350 pounds. To put it into perspective, 2/3 of that is considered elite level in modern powerlifting. And that's just the upper body story. Power wasn't all they had, speed too. Their anatomy tells the tale: shorter legs, long and wide toes that stay grounded longer for explosive starts, and narrow Achilles tendons that weren't built for long-distance running, but for fast bursts. Plus, their muscles had a higher concentration of fast-twitch fibers, excellent for sprinting, not endurance. So don't challenge a Neanderthal to a marathon, you'd win there, but sprint, you're toast. Now let's peek at their insides, starting with their lungs and breathing. Their rib cages were wide and deep, like custom performance mods, allowing supercharged lung capacity and explosive oxygen intake. Studies suggest lung volumes were around 20% greater than modern humans. Some specimens like Kibarito could have held up to 9 liters of air, 40% more than even the largest athlete today. Their noses were equally impressive, long and wide to funnel cold air quickly and efficiently. This helped warm and humidify incoming air, perfect for cold environments and high metabolism. Their noses moved air about 100% faster than ours. All this suggests one thing: Neanderthals were built for power, speed, and survival in brutal conditions. Muscles, breathing, and bones optimized for short, high-intensity bursts, not marathon endurance. Their physiology told an even deeper story about how they lived. Those short, sturdy frames were not optimized for chasing prey over endless plains the way modern humans might do with persistence hunting. Instead, Neanderthals were the ambush predators of the human world, bursting out from cover, closing in quickly, and relying on brute force to finish the job. Everything about their bodies pointed toward intense, high-impact encounters rather than long hauls. Even their joints were adapted for that kind of lifestyle. Larger, more robust joints meant they could handle extreme stresses without breaking down. Movements that might strain or dislocate a modern human's limb were just part of the daily routine for them. And their hands, while not necessarily larger overall, they were shaped differently, broader fingertips and thumbs set at wider angles. This may have reduced the kind of delicate precision we have, but it allowed for an iron-like grip on weapons and tools, making them lethal and efficient in close combat. On the inside, they carried another edge: energy demands that would shock a modern nutritionist. Estimates suggest they needed anywhere from 4,500 to 6,700 calories per day, more than double what most people today consume. That means if they lived among us now, food packaging might have had to print two separate nutrition labels, one for Homo sapiens, one for Neanderthals. The bulk of these calories came from meat, and a lot of it. Isotopic analysis of their remains shows they were hypercarnivores, getting about 70% of their diet from animal protein. This high-protein, high-fat intake not only fueled their muscular builds but also helped them thrive in cold and forgiving environments. Their metabolism wasn't just about sustaining muscle mass, it was about surviving in climates where heat escaped the body fast. Like other cold-adapted animals, they burned fuel quickly to compensate for heat loss. This explains both their enormous caloric needs and their physical adaptations: wide nasal cavities to warm and humidify cold air, large lungs to deliver oxygen efficiently, and robust bodies to store energy and resist freezing temperatures. When it came to brain power, Neanderthals had something surprising up their sleeves, or rather, inside their skulls. Their brain cases were, on average, about 30% larger than those of modern humans. Male Neanderthals averaged around 1,640 cubic centimeters, females about 1,460 cubic centimeters. Now, bigger brains don't automatically mean higher intelligence, but the sheer size was enough to make researchers reconsider old stereotypes of them as primitive brutes. These massive brains allowed them to do much more than survive. Archaeological evidence shows they coordinated hunts, crafted tools, produced art, and cared for the sick and injured. They likely had complex communication systems and social structures. However, their brains were shaped differently, more rounded and elongated than ours. This meant certain areas, like those linked to vision and smell, were more developed. It's possible their exceptional eyesight, aided by larger eyes about 15% bigger than ours, demanded more brain power to process visual information. This might have been especially useful in low-light conditions, giving them an advantage at dawn, dusk, or in dense forests. Their large eyes, big brains, and long noses also contributed to their distinctive skull-shaped, big, forward-projecting faces with powerful jaws. At first, scientists thought those jaws were built for bone-crushing bite strength. But later studies revealed their bite force was roughly comparable to the stronger range of modern humans, at about 700 newtons. So why the big jaws and teeth? One compelling theory is that they used their teeth like a third hand. Where patterns on their front teeth suggest they frequently gripped objects, they're likely holding skins, sinew, or plant fibers while cutting or working with tools. That combination of physical toughness, sensory sharpness, and practical skill made Neanderthals incredibly well adapted to their world. They weren't marathoners, but in short-range bursts, they were devastating. They weren't delicate craftsmen in the modern sense, but they were powerful toolmakers with the ingenuity to survive in environments that would test even the hardiest modern explorers. What's fascinating is that, for all their differences, they were still close enough to us genetically to interbreed, and they did. Many people today carry small percentages of Neanderthal DNA. Most of the traits passed down seem subtle, slight influences on physical appearance or immune system function, but some scientists suggest their genes may have impacted metabolism, adaptation to cold, and even certain disease resistances. The truth is, we're still figuring out exactly how much of them lives on in us. And while much about them remains a mystery, one thing is clear: Neanderthals were not the slow, dim-witted cave dwellers popular culture once imagined. They were specialized athletes of survival engineered by nature for raw power, explosive speed, and resilience in some of the harshest environments Earth has ever seen. Even though they've been gone for tens of thousands of years, the Neanderthals' legacy still sparks intense curiosity, not just because they were so physically formidable, but because they were so human in many ways. They weren't some alien offshoot struggling to keep up. They were thriving, adapting, and innovating in their own right. One of the more striking aspects of their lifestyle was how dangerous everyday life could be. Between the injuries from hunting large, aggressive animals and the conflicts with each other, it's astonishing that so many survived long enough to heal from massive trauma. Imagine stalking a mammoth or a rhinoceros with nothing but a spear you made yourself, getting knocked down or gored, and still making it back to your shelter alive. The fact that so many Neanderthal skeletons show healed wounds means they didn't just abandon the injured, they cared for them. This kind of social cooperation speaks volumes about their community bonds. Their hunting style also explains why they were built like they were. Close quarters hunting meant absorbing a lot of impact, both from prey fighting back and from the physical demands of thrusting heavy spears with force. That constant, repetitive stress likely shaped their bodies from a young age, leaving them with dense, heavily muscled frames. In modern terms, you could almost think of them as lifelong contact sport athletes, rugby players, or wrestlers who never retired. Of course, their diet played a huge role too. As hypercarnivores, Neanderthals relied on high-calorie, nutrient-rich animal meat to fuel their massive energy needs. But evidence shows they weren't strictly meat eaters. They also consumed plants, seeds, and nuts when available. This dietary flexibility would have been crucial in the shifting climates of the Ice Age. Still, the meat-heavy aspect of their diet is what allowed them to maintain their extraordinary muscle mass and survive in frigid conditions where plant food was scarce. What's also remarkable is their adaptability to different environments. They weren't confined to a single habitat type. They ranged from the icy tundras of Ice Age Europe to more temperate forests and grasslands. Their physical traits, the wide nasal passages, robust bones, high-calorie metabolism, were part of a package that let them endure huge swings in temperature and resource availability. They were survivalists in the truest sense, equipped to handle almost anything nature threw at them. When we think about intelligence, it's easy to focus only on brain size. But for Neanderthals, intelligence was tied to survival in a very practical way. They knew how to make complex tools, control fire, build shelters, and possibly even create symbolic art. These are not the actions of a simple-minded species, they're signs of a culture with knowledge passed down over generations. They could plan hunts, adapt strategies, and respond to changing conditions, which is exactly what you'd expect from a species that thrived for hundreds of thousands of years. And then there's the part of their story that involves us directly: the interbreeding. Genetic evidence leaves little doubt that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals met, lived near each other, and had children together. Today, non-African populations generally carry about 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. While most of these inherited traits are subtle, they may have provided advantages to early humans moving into colder climates, possibly influencing things like skin pigmentation, hair thickness, or immune system responses. However, the lasting impact of their DNA is still debated. Some studies suggest links to certain modern health conditions or metabolic traits, while others find minimal influence. What's clear is that their genetic fingerprints remain part of our shared human story. In a way, they're not entirely gone, they live on inside us. It's tempting to imagine what the world would be like if they had survived alongside us. Would they be professional athletes, dominating weightlifting and wrestling? Would they work in dangerous, physically demanding jobs that require incredible stamina and strength? Or would their unique physiology make them stand out in completely unexpected ways? We may never know exactly how they would have fit into our modern world. But one thing is certain: Neanderthals were far more than the outdated stereotype of lumbering cavemen. They were finely tuned survival machines, fast, strong, intelligent, and socially complex. Their extinction wasn't because they were inferior, but because the world changed, and circumstances shifted in ways even the toughest species couldn't withstand. And maybe that's why they continue to fascinate us. They were like us, close enough to be family but different enough to feel almost mythical. They remind us that human history isn't just the story of us, but of the many paths evolution explored, and the extraordinary beings who walked them.